How's it going, YouTube? Always busy dad here again. My dad lent me his Kubota little homeowner tractor. It's a nice little backhoe, a little 3-cylinder diesel. It's not the most powerful unit, but for doing smaller projects, it works out. You can actually get a mower deck for it and stuff. That's how small it is. Since I've been using it every couple of days, actually not even every couple of hours or so, it seems to plug the outlet for the diesel into the fuel filter, the pre-filter before it goes into the pump and everything. Sometimes it even plugs up the whole hole where the fuel comes out of the tank to enter the fuel line to feed the motor. And the other day I noticed that I took a magnet and I stuck it down inside the tank about where it was, and there's all these fragments of rusty metal. Come to find out, it's the fuel sending unit, because the unit's kind of old. I'd say it's at least 20 years old. The sending unit is just rotted and it's disintegrating inside the tank, which is causing parts to fall off and plug the port where the fuel would come out. So I'm gonna take it apart and get access to the sending unit, which happens to be right underneath this fender by the cup holder here. But in order to get to the sending unit, I believe you have to remove this whole back shroud, and I'm gonna do that just to give myself some more access so that I can get into the tank and clean out whatever else might be in it. So this is how I'm gonna go through it. So yeah, so far all I've done is there are 3 bolts on either side to take off the rollover bar, which I just took off and mounted on the ground. Each light on the side just has the little butt connectors that are inside the insulator. And then there's also tail lights on it, which in this case I just pulled out the whole bulb assembly from the light assembly so that it would not have to disconnect all the wiring and everything. So far, and in order to get the seat off, from what I could tell so far, there was a cotter pin in the end of that pin there that holds the seat into its mounting bracket, and then on this side there's a bracket that's bolted in with a 14mm that'll just keep it from sliding to the right side and coming out if the cotter pin happens to get lost. So since I pulled out the cotter pin already, I'm just going to take that bolt off, and then you slide the seat towards the right side of the machine, and it should come right out of the brackets. And then when I'm done with that, from what I understand, all these levers, they kind of just pull off. They're just sort of stuck on there, nothing too much pressure. Again, this is an older unit, so they might be a little bit harder on newer units. And then there's also, I'm gonna have to disconnect that. I'm gonna go underneath and see how that comes apart. And then there's also the lever for the angle of the PTO on the back. So I'm gonna have to take those 2 apart. If I'm not mistaken, that's just a keyway on that one. So if you put like a pickle bar or something like that on the back side of it, that'll hold both of it, and then you can tap on it with a hammer to get it to slide off. And then there's various nuts and bolts that you got to take off. I believe underneath here there are a couple screws to get the plastic housing off. I'm gonna have to take the floor mat off, which is just a whole bunch of these little Christmas trees. Get those all off and out of the way. And then I believe there is underneath here, there were some carriage bolts that hold the 2 pieces together. Looks like some of them are already out and missing, probably from my dad doing things on it earlier and his ownership of it. So I'm gonna start taking off this back shroud and the seat, and I'll get back with you guys in a little bit. All right, so I got it up to this height. There's a bolt underneath this end of the handle and a bolt underneath that end of the handle, and then that bracket that goes in between them. You take those off on both sides. I didn't pull the controls underneath here. Also, there are 2 sensors that go to the seat. This one was obviously broken a while ago, so just put my dad put a radiator clamp around it to keep it activated at all times so you could start the unit. But as you can see, that's the fuel sending unit right there. There's a ground wire and a power wire that go to it, and then it looks like 5 screws that hold the sending unit in. And since I have a little ratcheting screwdriver, I'll be able to take it out without having to pull the whole assembly all the way up. And again, there was a bolt in that hole, and there was 1 carriage bolt in the hole over here underneath, and then another bolt underneath that bracket there that held that together. It's a nut and bolt. And also the bracket for the seat was a nut and bolt also. So to keep the seat from sliding out, as you can see, it was a nut and a bolt that I took off. I'm gonna pull the sending unit and then we'll see what it looks like, and I'll go pick up the new one tomorrow since it's Sunday. Alright guys, so as I said, I just popped up the fender and I took out the fuel pump, or the fuel sending unit, sorry. It's basically just what operates the gauge. And I have this piece of wire and some magnets left over from another project that I did. They're little neodymium magnets from a bottle opener that I made that mounted on the wall, or on a refrigerator, so you can move it and whatever. That's the rust particles I've taken out so far, and as you can see, the magnet's doing a decent job. Just feed it in on the wire, try to scrape it around on the bottom of the tank as much as I can, and then when I get it full, I bring it out and I'm just gonna clean it off onto the toolbox for now. And that is the actual sending unit that was inside of the tank. As you can see, it's just a little float and an arm, and I'm unsure how much farther that actually stuck down, but it looks like a fair amount of it is rotted off and dropped inside the tank. And as you can see, there are some bigger pieces of metal that were in there. I mean, they're nothing huge. Most of the rest of that stuff is just like little balls of rust that are just building up where the fuel goes out of the tank and causing it to restrict the fuel flow to the engine. So I'm just going to keep working on this for a little while, see if I can get the rest of the rest of the metal fragments out. And then underneath, you can see where the line comes out of the tank and goes into that pre-filter over there. And I'm going to disconnect that there, and that's the pumping line afterwards. And then there's another filter up on the engine itself before it actually goes into the injector pump. So once I get a bit more of the metal out of the tank, I'm going to disconnect that, drain out whatever fuel might be in there, and then take off the fuel cap and probably pour some in there just to kind of flush it through and see if there's any other fragments that might be able to push out and into the pan that I've been draining the tank into. Yesterday afternoon, when it started doing this, I took the pan off, or the thing off, and as you can see, that stuff was inside the filter. So it's just been a periodic problem that every time you go to use it, it's like the sending unit just degrades a little bit more and more particles keep falling out. And my dad's coming back soon, so I'm gonna get it up and running and give it back to him in working order. I'll show you guys what happens when I get the fuel sending unit in. Again, it's Sunday, so I won't be able to get it till at least tomorrow. And then I'll show you how to put it back in and make sure that the gauge is working, and hopefully the tank's all cleaned out and we're good to go from there. How's it going, guys? Finally got that sending unit in. I installed it. Again, you saw where it goes underneath here. It was fairly simple. It was a slightly modified design. Instead of the power wire going directly to the top of the sending unit, it had a little module with a wire that came out of it in order for the ground to connect, or the power to connect to it. And then the ground just goes on one of the screws. So I'm just in the process of reassembling it. I have the back shields back on and roll bar back on. And all I got left to do is put the seat back in and then put some fuel in it, and we'll see if the fuel gauge works again, which it hasn't worked in a few years, according to my father. So I just gotta feed the wires for the lights back in through the little hole to connect them back up underneath, and put the seat back on and the floor mats back on. And once I have all that all back together, I'll put some fuel in it, and well, I'll put the fuel I drained out, I'll clean it, strain it, and then put the fuel back in and make sure that the sending unit's working like it's supposed to. And I'll show you guys that process in a few.